Hi, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast. My name is Isabel Ross, and I'm the coach at Peak Endurance Coaching. Episode 91 is an interview and discussion with Ben Lindsey, founder of the company Solushin. Ben was an athlete, actually a swimmer, who once he transitioned from swimming, started running and suffered from shin splints. He wasn't impressed by the available ways of dealing with them, so in conjunction with other athletes, he developed a system to deal with shin splints. I know for myself, in my early days of running, I got shin splints that I ignored, mainly because I didn't have a clue what was going on and I didn't know what they were. I continued ignoring them until they actually turned into stress fractures, and yes, fractures, not just one. I think we all make silly mistakes when we are new runners. Knowledge is power, and the more we know about the different injuries runners can sustain, and the more we know about the available treatments, the better off we will be. I hope this podcast interview offers you some insights into how to avoid or treat this injury if you happen to be unlucky enough to have it. If you are like the majority of runners, you may feel like you are constantly beset with niggles, a euphemism for injuries, that take away from your joy of running. You may even have sore shins that could lead to shin splints. So if you're sick of these niggles, come in and see the specialists at Health and High Performance, where they will utilise the latest in technology and experience to help you get back on form and running to your potential. So head to healthhp.com.au/run, book an appointment and ensure you can run without pain and enjoy your sport again. You can of course also find them on Instagram, Health High Performance. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. I really appreciate it when people take time out of their day to get on over to Apple Podcasts to rate, review and subscribe. It really means a lot to me. And I read all of the reviews and they inspire me and motivate me to keep working on it. Thanks so much. If you enjoy this episode, please do take that time and go on over and rate, review and subscribe. As I keep banging on about, I am aiming for 100 reviews by Easter, but I'm not sure I'll make it, so plan B is coming along and hopefully you can help me get as close as possible. At Peak Endurance Coaching, I coach athletes to run any distance, long, short, ultras, anything on any surface, road, track or trail, from beginners to advanced. So if you're interested, email me isabel@peakendurancecoaching.com.au so that I can help you with a structured, individualised plan that takes into account your life and your running needs. Enjoy the interview with... Hi Ben, and welcome to the Peak Endurance Podcast.
Hi Isabel, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How about you?
Good, thank you. Very happy to be here. Excellent.
On this beautiful summer's day. I don't know what it's like. You're up in Sydney, aren't you?
Yeah, it's very cloudy out here, and I work in a basement at the university, basically. No. So my one window looks out at a stairwell. So if there's no sunlight.
No. Well, I'm sorry to say, but I can look out the window and see beautiful blue sky. So lucky me.
Lucky you.
Now, can you tell the listeners a bit about yourself and your athletic background, just to start us off?
So I used to be a swimmer. I can still swim relatively well. Picked it up when I was about 11. I was fortunate enough so I was part of the West Australian Institute of Sport for a while when I lived over in Perth as a sprint swimmer. Moved to Canberra, was part of the AIS, part of NSWIS, the NSWIS squad in Sydney. And I was fortunate enough to medal at nationals. So I've been a silver and bronze medalist at Australian Opens and gone to World Cups. Pretty much felt a bit lost when I was coming to the end of swimming on what I wanted to do with myself. I was studying engineering and everyone was pointing me in the direction of either studying medicine or becoming a civil engineer or something like that. And I just found it a bit dull. If I'm honest, being a civil engineer in medicine, I just didn't think was for me because I did like to tinker and build. So yeah, ended up studying biomedical engineering with mechanical engineering so I could try and build products for athletes and people like myself rather than being
biomedical
being
engineering. What's that? Is that like for people who've had amputations and that? It's fluff.
Oh, so it's a fluff. It's a fluffy. Some people you see in the cohort, some people will get rid of the bio so they can say medical engineering because it sounds cooler. It basically so with biomedical mechanical engineering, it's mechanical engineering and applications to the body. You can also do chemical biomedical engineering, so looking at the molecular chemistry of the body, things like that. So me doing mechanical, starting really swings towards orthopedics, so the musculoskeletal system. So, yeah.
So you're interested in shin splints. How does a swimmer get interested in shin splints? I can't imagine they're that common.
They are common if the swimmer decides to run. So we spend our whole time pointing our toes. Swimmers don't generally have strong ankles. We don't generally have strong calves. I was actually famous in swimming for having stupidly big calves, which I love to show off. But I did this training camp once in Margaret River in WA, and we just had to run along the sand for too long. And then all of a sudden I had this burn in my shins, and every pain I ever had was shoulders, right? Like most swimmers, it was always shoulders.
Yeah.
But then my shins went. And then over the years, I could never, every time I skipped, every time I tried to run or do anything, walk too far in a day, my shins would flare up.
Yeah.
And it only became a problem because I had slap tears in both my shoulders, so labral tears, just from overuse. I'd have to do a bit of cross training. So, cardio in the gym, bike work, running. And I just every time I ran, it became really bad. So I never got to do the running, never got to do the skipping. It just meant more time on the bike, on a stationary bike in a hot room, looking out at a gym, soundproofed off, just bored.
Sounds awesome. Yeah.
So that's how I got associated with the injury. But it was never a season ruiner or anything like that for me. It was just frustrating. So if I was a runner, I can imagine it's a whole different ballpark.
Now, what is the technical name that shin splints are known by? Everyone calls them shin splints. What's the technical name? And can you explain why that name exists?
What I'll do for that, I'll quickly show you. So quickly go through the slides. So a lot of these slides, we do a lot of CPD stuff. So shin splints is actually, depending on who you talk to, a variety of different injuries, right? So most of the time, research would suggest, and just talking to clinics as well, that people are referring to medial tibial stress syndrome. But not always the case. So we've dealt with I've spoken with some NRL teams and things like that. They say shin splints, they mean tibialis anterior, exertional compartment syndrome. Someone else says shin splints, they say it's actually a tendinopathy of the tibialis anterior or tib post. Some of them get quite far away from the shin. For me, to think that they're referring it to shin splints sometimes. But I think, the most common one, and the one that I'm particularly interested in, is medial tibial stress syndrome, so MTSS, which on this slide, it's the bony pain. So, generally caused by overload, a mismanagement of load and poor strength in a runner. So.
All right. So, so why do we call it shin splints? What is the origin of that name?
I actually
don't know.
I don't know specifically. I've heard people refer to it as it feels like splinters in your shins. So I'm assuming it might. Do you know the answer to that one?
No, I'm actually was really wondering. I was hoping you knew.
I've never been asked. No,
it's not a rhetorical question. No, I've always wondered, because I wondered if does the bone slightly splinter? I was thinking, would that be it? But surely not. So, but I mean, I've had it as have you, and it's incredibly painful. But I can't say it feels like the bone splintering.
Well, I think I can dive into that a little bit. So MTSS, the last S is syndrome. As a syndrome, multifactorial, I sometimes think it's because no one knows. It's the pathophys. So what's happening is sometimes very poorly understood. It's most of the time poorly understood. Very hard to know what's going on. But what they've shown under MRI is pretty much a graded translation from initial bone stress, so just a little bit of periostitis and inflammation, to cortical bone issues. So the bone starting to deteriorate as well due to bone stress, and then stress fractures. So the literature and like what people see in clinics is if a runner doesn't get on top of it, they're at very high risk of progressing not to just a pain and some inflammation, but to a stress fracture, and that's when they might get put in a boot and completely immobilized to let it heal. So maybe that's where shin splints comes from. It is maybe not a splinter, but the crack in the bone.
Yeah. So you talked about overload and poor strength. So basically the cause is doing too much too soon with a body that's not strong enough to cope with that load?
Yeah, so when we what we see basically, if we're talking about load, kind of comes down to the management of it is, where kind of a strong connection comes. So the most effective way to treat the injury is to kind of rest and undergo a load management program. According to clinical research, I'm also a firm believer in strengthening the calves, strengthening like anything that you identify as weak in a runner where it's a primary muscle for running. I think it should be targeted just because of the muscular chain. But it's predominantly occurring pre-season, at the end of the season when volumes change or surfaces change. So very much linked to an overuse injury.
Can it be, is it also partly, tightness in the calves?
Yeah, so even though it's a bone, it's a little analogy we have as the team. We've got a bunch of little analogies for us. So Will Roser and I, who are passionate about this injury, our favorite analogy is, while it's a bone response, it's kind of like you wouldn't ride downhill on a road bike, right?
God, no.
So because what would happen is you crack the road bike frame, it would just break apart and things like that. And that's why you've got a downhill bike. You've got these springs in place to help the frame distribute the load. And it's the same thing for you, like for your calves, for your shins. Your muscles and your bone interact together, and you need to make sure they're working in unison. So the calves, we see the soleus, so the big flat almost triangular calf muscle, which sits under the nice gastrocnemius, which everyone likes to show off when they're showing off their calves.
That's right.
They take a brunt of the load, or the soleus in particular rather takes a brunt of the load when you're running. And if you don't have a strong soleus, if you've got a weak dysfunctioning soleus or a weak tight muscle, not only are there other biomechanical implications, but as using that downhill bike analogy, if it's not there to support the frame, you can expect the frame to crack. So
that makes sense. And can running on, you talked about different surfaces, if you run predominantly on the road, are you more likely to be susceptible to shin splints than, say, if you're running on the trails?
So that depends on what you read, really. So what I will say is, when we look into load management programs, we do believe in variable surfaces. And we do believe on softer surfaces. And it comes down to that bone loading theory for us. Sometimes you read papers and what you see in papers doesn't translate to what you see in real life. It does happen. I know there's some analysis out there that will tell you not so much. But what we recommend and what we see is, changing the surfaces, including those soft grass surfaces, things like that, as part of a program. And that's because less impact on the bone. You're hitting a softer surface. It all works in unison if you look at it that way.
Yeah. Now, if I've got sore shins and I go and see someone, how is it diagnosed that it's actually MTSS?
I'll quickly do. So MTSS, it's an interesting one. Sorry, my screen's just gone a bit wacky. Can you see my slide?
No, it just disappeared.
Okay, I'll bring it back up. Yeah.
There we go.
All good?
Yep.
Perfect. Now, so MTSS, as we saw on a slide earlier, it's predominantly dull, achy pain, sometimes burning, depending on the patient, on the inside border, so the medial border of the shin bone, the tibia.
Yeah.
And it often presents, it's more likely to present in the lower third. Interestingly, so it's tender to touch, so tender to palpate, really tender to touch for some people. Like, they really don't like you bothering them down there. But for a correct diagnosis, an interesting thing is they're looking for a 5 centimeter kind of space where they palpate or where the patient's presenting symptoms. It's not just a focal point.
Oh, okay. So, as in the size of the sore spot.
Yeah, the size of the sore spot. You're looking for at least a 5 centimeter spread.
Okay.
Now, I may be wrong actually on this. This is probably a question for Will McNamara on the team. My interpretation of that is, if you're getting those focal pains and that really focus spot, you probably, if you're a clinician or you're the runner, you probably want to go get an MRI because you really want to rule out a stress fracture, because I know the pain for them gets very focalized.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just writing notes for later.
It's all good.
So once we've got it diagnosed, and sometimes that's half the battle, because as we spoke about before we started recording, we've both had shin splints that turned into stress fractures. Certainly for myself, speaking of my own experience, I was fairly new to running. I didn't really, I thought it sore, whatever. And I wore compression socks, thinking that would help, which it did absolutely nothing, obviously. So what are the sorts of things that people tend to do before they get diagnosed, and what should they do once they've been diagnosed?
Look, there's a lot of things out there which are meant to be a go-to quick fix. That's what it's marketed as. And it's for that reason you don't see them in a lot of clinics. So, there's a lot of things you can buy without going to a clinic that do work, and methods that do work and do help. But kind of the analogy we run with is, it's silly, but it's an easy thing for everyone to remember. It's the hot dog analogy, where you've got a hot dog. So you're buying a hot dog, and then you've got all the condiments on it. The hot dog for us in this case, and what we see in clinical practice, is load management. So having someone tell you, help you gauge the surface you're running on, the volume of which you're running. Load management does also include things like you can, for a lot of patients, they get good results deloading the tibia with small heel pads, so for the heel striking, different shoes. It's about getting on top of the load. So that's the hot dog. And then all the condiments you can put on top of the hot dog, depending on the patient, you're going to get a better result. They're going to enjoy the hot dog more. You've got some strengthening. So if you've got a patient with weak calves, and you can identify that, definitely get on top of it. I think soleus, particularly bent knee calf raises and things like that, are very important. Unfortunately for runners, the quick thing they go for is those compression sleeves. And, we have a slide, if you want me to show, it's just a bit of a further on. It shows, it's this big RCT. I think it's a Dutch group. Here we go here. So it's this Dutch group, Moen et al., and they do a lot of MTSS research, right? And they did this nice big RCT on compression sleeves with load management. And they just showed, compression sleeves, they're just not getting the results. I do have to ask why. In all the running groups I follow, people say they had great results with compression sleeves. There's obviously something they're doing with it. I think they might be resting, or they might be.
Or could it be the placebo effect?
It could be. There's also the notion it might be the pain desensitization. So just blocking the pain. That's a big thing. We've seen some crazy devices out there. One of the ones, this one here, it didn't go very far. So I don't know any runners who bought it.
Unsurprisingly.
It was an aluminium rod. that you
cool.
could put down the whole border. This was done on military personnel, and it just didn't have any. It had very bad compliance issues. But again, if we're going back to that analogy of the mountain bike and going downhill versus a road bike, something like this, it's sure it might be compressing inflammation to some degree, but it's not addressing that, the muscle, the posterior muscles, so your soleus and things like that, which are so often implicated. So even for example, if this worked, you would still be wanting to do something about calf tightness and calf weakness as well. So yeah.
And certainly, as we said, deloading is a main component.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's why there was that big slide I went past there. Rest is most effective. It really comes down to the strength of the coach, the podiatrist, the physio. It's their ability to treat the injury. As a runner, if they really were not going to go see someone and they didn't want to get help, for short to medium term until they try and run again, because they might, if they're not educated, it might come back. Really, their best option is to rest, just to not do it.
But work on strengthening the calf so that the calf doesn't lose more strength.
Yeah, no, exactly. This I'm talking in a sense of if they're not going to come talk to someone and get told that and they're just going to shop for things online, compression sleeves and things. Rest was the most effective, and that was pretty much a frustration myself and a lot of athletes had. So
because one thing is athletes are not necessarily the best at resting. Taking days off.
Not at all. No, and that's the thing. They just they don't.
That's right.
Yeah. So.
So cool. So what sort of so you get a shin splint and if you don't get it diagnosed and do something about it, basically it turns into a stress fracture. What is once that occurs, then there is complete deloading. So it's best, like you said, to do the rest now and strengthen the calf now.
Yeah.
And
sorry, you go.
No, go on.
I was going to say, optimally, you wouldn't completely rest. You would just deload and then build back up. Yeah.
Well, certainly when I had my stress fracture, I was pool running and swimming. So even once you have a stress fracture, you can still exercise, but it's getting rid of the load that caused the problem, which is generally the running. So there are, as you said, many methods of dealing with shin splints. Now, you and your partners in your business have created a calf sleeve style methodology for dealing with this. Can you talk to us about that one?
I definitely can. Look, our whole process was identifying, so we know what works. You get load management, you get strengthening, it works. It can just take a bit, right? So on one end, you've got these, and we were fortunate enough at the levels of sport we were at that we were provided pretty good programs. It just took a while still, depending on the severity. And we see that it translates across most of professional sport. They get good results. They're just frustrated with how long it takes. And then from an athlete's perspective, there's no short-term win. There's nothing quick. It's all about backing off and then introducing new exercises. And athletes, despite being exercise fanatics, don't like prehab or rehab exercises. It's all of a sudden they don't want to do them. They're happy to do all the beach weights in the world, but then you give them some calf raises or some banded exercises, and this isn't going to make me bigger, or I'm not going to look as good anymore. So compliance is bad. So basically, what we were looking to do, so we designed this thing called the Solushin, and our hypothesis was that you take what works, which was load management and strengthening for us. And what we wanted to do was see if by compressing the periostitis along the posteromedial border, so that area of pain for shin splint sufferers, And by reducing tension in the calf, we could take what we know works, give athletes short-term pain relief, so something to help manage the pain. So there's that short-term win, so to help the psychology of it, help with the compliance and things like that. But then also over the medium to long term, not make this a constantly adjusting, often hit and miss process for a lot of people, or just a long drawn out return to full load running. Because we were looking at studies, it takes, for a lot of people, it can take up to 6 months till they're running with negligible pain. They might get a drop at the start, but it just took too long. And with something like MTSS, I know with I'm not an expert on knee injuries at all, but the analogy I've been given or the comparison I've been given by some clinicians is with knee pain, some of them you can run with 5, 6 out of 10 pain, and not be at risk. But with MTSS, it's if you're at 1 out of 10, you need to be very aware that it's a nasty path that you're following. Yeah. So it's basically, it's not a compression sleeve. It was to solve that problem of the junky things getting sold to people. Compression sleeves do serve a purpose, just not with this injury. So this sleeve here is actually not compression at all. What we're doing is targeting the soleus with these 3 nodes, and then we've got a rod in the sleeve. And what these top 3 straps we've shown to have done, it's published in the Journal of Science and Medicine and Sports, improves ankle range of motion by 21% in an hour of wear. And then together, the whole thing, again, published in the same journal, we did a randomized controlled trial and showed with load management, that's important, with load management and strengthening, all the participants with the Solushin were pain-free at 4.5, 5 weeks and running in full capacity. But then everyone with the load management with just a placebo, which was a compression sleeve, which we always like to laugh about sometimes. They had no measurable change for 6 months on their return to training with no pain. So we're pretty happy with it.
Yeah, obviously, you're not running in this.
No. So this is before or after exercise.
Yes.
So
I just wanted to make that clear to the listeners that you're not actually running in it.
No. We spoke to a lot of runners. We partner with New South Wales Health, and we talked to 500 runners, and we learned very early on that runners like wearing Garmins and shoes and nothing else. So, like when they run. So we knew this had to be a recovery tool.
So can you explain what the rod is for in the side there?
So just this green rod here.
Yeah.
So basically, it sits on that periostitis, so that inflammation. So compressing inflammation, it's not our biggest innovation. It's something we knew worked, and I think I do believe, it's pretty much as simple as that: compressing the pain, compressing the inflammation. The bottom strap and all the straps also apply what's called an inferomedial torsion. So this area of pain, these straps basically pull the calf around ever so slightly, so it also doesn't have the same pull and tension on that area while you're wearing it. So, yeah.
So sort of like how the kinesiology tape is purported to sort of pull the muscle away a bit. It's sort of doing that sort of thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you can definitely use the tape to reverse the torsion. The problem, so we wouldn't recommend this device with just the rod at all, or just the torsion, because so what we're looking for here, and we're doing some studies with Edinburgh Rugby and some of the footy teams through Australia, because our ankle ROM study, we've only got a short-term acute published study, and then obviously all the other data is just from feedback from all the patients using it, but nothing that we're allowed to use properly. You've got to be addressing the calf. Like you've got to be looking at it, and poor ankle range of motion is such a big factor in the injury, and weakness in the soleus. So this isn't meant to be the be all or end all. You're still going to have to do the strengthening exercises, but what you can expect with this is help.
Yeah, and I would assume also ankle range of motion exercises too would be helpful.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think yeah, like this has nothing to do as well, just to highlight, with ankle joint stiffness leading to poor ankle range of motion. But yeah, all those exercises where you can improve your ankles range of motion, strengthen your calves. There's some great stuff out there now. I've seen some podiatrists and things getting results, strengthening hips, all these things, all kind of comes together to treat the injury quite well.
And that's often the way, is that there's not one fix for these things.
No.
And using a variety of modalities will ensure that you can achieve success quicker and more successfully.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And we're out. That's pretty much what we've been championing the whole time. This device serves its purpose, but should not be. It's not the whole thing. It's to solve that frustration of what exists with what works, but you've still got to do what works.
So how did you guys figure this out?
Just, guessing and then doing a study and hoping it worked. Pretty much.
Trial and error. So, yes.
Yeah. Read a lot of papers, spoke to a lot of people, some doctors down in Sydney, rather, from where I used to live. Always say down in Sydney, we spoke to them through the hypothesis. We looked into myofascial pain disorders. We looked into myofascial traction things. We looked into a variety of things, and basically all the theories surrounded bone loading, or bone loading, or the soft tissue, myofascial stuff. So we just basically made something that identified the commonalities in those areas, which was the periostitis along the border of the bone, and then the soleus. It's just, even if they don't have the injury, if there's a lot of muscles that get associated, we pick the soleus just because anytime you look at the force output, or the brunt of the force rather, that the soleus takes when a runner runs, it just cops it. So it makes sense to show that muscle love as opposed to the perioneals, the tibialis posterior, all these other muscles that get implicated with the injury. The soleus we just chose out of, I think, trying to give it the love we thought it deserved. Yeah.
And if I don't have shin splints but I'm doing a lot of running, is this still good for recovery?
It really comes down to who the runner is. So a lot of the ankle ROM stuff, so we did that second study just because of its implication in other injuries. It was clinicians who asked us to do it. We just were doing the MTS, the thing on shin splints first. But again, it just wouldn't be a be all or end all. If you've got calf tightness and calf issues, you can expect to use this after a run, and it can address those things. It can help with your dorsiflexion. Our biggest positive reviews are that it just makes your calves feel great. But I think if we're looking at a patient who's got, say there's 100% of their maximal calf range that they can achieve, and you've got a runner who's got 95% of that maximal range already achieved, and their calves are still, a bit sore, I wouldn't think that, you can still expect them to maybe get like a 90, they might get to 96% after wearing it for an hour and things like that. But if you're looking at a patient, so we had people in the in the other study who they had terrible ankle range of motion. Like I'm talking like 1 centimeter knee to walls and things like that. So that's like the knee just in front of the toes. Those people who are at 5% of their maximal range, they get huge improvements very quick. So if you're a runner, you've got poor ankle range of motion and tight calves, you're at risk of a lot of injuries. So the device could serve a purpose there. But if you're a runner who's got brilliant calf range, strong calves, and your calves just get a bit sore, it might make your calves feel great, but I think you're just dealing with something everyone's dealing with, just sore bodies after running.
Sore tired bodies. Yeah, that's right.
So,
it's just part and parcel. Yeah. So, okay. So just say we've had the shin splints and we've done everything like this. Are we more susceptible to getting shin splints again?
Unfortunately, yes. The most common people to get shin splints are
People who've had it.
people who've had it.
Yeah.
I can't find the slide. It's in there somewhere. You've got to look at a patient's history whenever you're diagnosing the injury, because the people who are most at risk, it's female netballers and hockey players and anyone who's had it before. So so if you've got a history of it, you're unfortunately, going to get it again. But I think if you take if you're focusing on everything that's known about the injury and all these risk factors, and you're reducing your likelihood of having one of those risk factors, so the poor ankle range, you're not coming back from months of eating pizza and drinking and then going straight back into the same running program. If you're being careful and building yourself back up, there's no reason to suggest that you'll get the injury again. But I think personally, this is not research at all, just witnessing, my opinion is every time I see someone get shin splints again, they've forgotten things that they should have been doing to not get it, not get the injury.
And I think oftentimes runners are quite good at ignoring niggles and those sorts of things, So it's really all about listening to the body as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And honestly, shin splints, I think it's because it's a very broad spectrum of pain that someone can experience. It starts from a shin tickle, so something very light, and can get very, very bad. And we see that in some of the stuff we've done. We shared a case study. One of my friends, he's a former swimmer, who's on a TV show that he had to train for. We showed how the device was used for him, and this swimmer, he was Olympian. He's tough as nails, absolute animal. Does not complain, just gets stuff done. And we shared the fact that he had shin splints, and we had all these comments like, "Oh, pussy, sook, loser," all this stuff. Get over it.
No.
And it's just like, so I think, and they were like, "I'm a runner. I just run through this," and we just saw hundreds of those. So there's definitely people out there running through it, and if they get over it by running through it, kudos to them. But
I've never heard of it happening.
Everything would suggest that that's not going to happen.
No. Well, they'll run through the shin splints. Definitely, they'll cut into a stress fracture.
Yeah, exactly.
So and not a recommended course of action unless you want a decent break from running.
Yeah. It's a good way to set yourself up for an excuse.
Yeah, that's it. So is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to talk to us about in regards to shin splints or anything else here?
I think for any runner who's not had an injury out there, it's just, I think like I've seen this a few times. You just, not even just shin splints, like any other injury, if you feel it, try and get on top of it sooner, because the more time you spend out of running and exercising, the more you're going to realize how important it was to your life, right? So one of the most important things I saw is when we spoke to all these runners, because you got to remember, we wanted to make sure that we thought they were going to, we just wanted to prove it, that all the weekend warriors, everyone who was just running for fun, they ran mentally the same reasons that we did as elite athletes, and when we had that sport taken away from us, they were going to have the same mental impact. And every single runner, as soon as they get injured and as soon as they're out of running, it's not just, okay, I'll relax, it's like depression, it's all these horrible things and these horrible cycles. So any runner out there, any injury or any niggle that you feel coming on, address it soon. Don't leave it, because you don't want to risk those windows of not training.
And when you say address it, I'm also assuming you would recommend getting it diagnosed rather than shopping around for.
Don't Dr. Google.
Don't Dr. Google. That's right.
You might have a sore heel and get diagnosed with epilepsy.
That's right. Probably likely using Google.
So definitely find a physio, podiatrist, sports doc, who works, and I think the best ones are also the ones who respect where they're great and then they send you out to other people.
Yeah.
So a lot of physios and podiatrists I've seen, they try and do everything, but the best ones are the ones that acknowledge that they can do X, Y, Z. Here's another person who can do, A, B, and C. And they give you that, all the treatment modalities to help you stay running.
Yeah. Can't get my words out. Are people able to get your solution through physios and that sort of thing? Is that how it works?
Yeah, they sure can. We're still a pretty young business. There's a couple of hundred physios and podiatrists that use it. Basically, a lot of them are trained in using it, and they just send you to our website, and then you buy it, and then they know how to use it. I think, the best way to go about it is you can talk to your physio or podiatrist first. If they want to see the research or they want to get connected with us, we can run them through it, let them know it's not another compression sleeve.
Yeah.
It's not another weird thing. It's got all this stuff, and make sure you follow everything else they give you. Because if you don't, you're going to have it without advice. You're going to have a great pain management tool. It's going to help your calves, but you're not going to address all the other things. So the injury, you might lose your symptoms. It'll come back. You've got to be educated on what the cause of the injury is, and address that with your clinician.
Yeah, it's not just about treating the symptoms; it's about treating the cause as well. And it
exactly.
I can imagine it would be easy for people to think, well, I'll put this on and that will fix it, because they don't have to do anything, like you said. Athletes aren't necessarily the best at compliance with exercises, but really, this is just part of the treatment. It's not the full treatment.
Yeah, and that's why we actually, every time someone buys one from us, they get a load management program. It's only to 3 6-kilometer runs a week. It's a very cautious one, and they can reach out to us, and if we can find the time, we'll help them tweak it.
Yeah.
But there's this educational video series we give, and it's basically, hey, this is what the injury is. You also need to do these things. Stick with the current gold standards. This is what the device will do for you. And this is where the device is good, but you can't expect it to be this magic wand
Miracle
that you
cure.
just tap your tibia with. You've got to go out and talk to the clinician. Like what we're trying to do at the moment is build a map, so all the clinicians who use it, a runner can log on, look at it, go, all right, these ones use it. If they've already got the solutions and they know these clinics are familiar with it, then they can go straight to that clinic and things like that. Like, we're trying to work with clinicians rather than, like, it would be stupid of us to not take what already works and make it better.
No, that sounds excellent. So can you, I'll put it in the show notes, but for people who are just listening on the fly at the moment, do you want to just give the website?
So it's Solushin.com. So Solushin.com. And if you head there, that's should have all the information and ways to contact us.
And the videos and all that sort of stuff as well.
Oh yeah, all the videos and things are there. Yep.
I love the play on words with the Solushin name.
Oh, we made that as a joke, and a prominent sports doctor loved it and told other people it was called that, so it's stuck.
I like it though. I think it's very clever.
Yeah, it has worked in our favor. It's every other thing out there's like an orthotic brace for medial tibial stress syndrome.
So wordy, in other words.
Yeah, just dull. Yeah. So it's good. It's a bit exciting.
Very clever. I like it. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about shin splints and how we can deal with them. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, and take care.
Thanks. Bye.